I will leave here. The feedback that is on these pieces of paper is there, or online, is there for you to start to really look at where this topic could potentially go, or also start to designate some questions for you. Just really design some questions to get your brain thinking, to get you starting to think along the lines of where this could possibly or potentially go. Many of you have also raised questions to ensure that this is going to fit within that realm of the assignment criteria. So the assignment criteria, as like a reminder, right? We are going to make sure that this topic is, yes, of course, that it's one that has some kind of controversy. It's like when you write too close, you ever do that?
That's correct.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, that's why. There we go. Okay. So some type of controversy. This issue is debatable. And that means it has two or more sides to what could potentially be done or what the belief or value is around it. But that it also is an issue that exists in what? The realm. Actually, we shouldn't even say that. It exists. So an issue that exists as a result of some type of injustice. So some of us, like for example, right? So if we say the drug war. A good start, a topic I am looking at, but now I start to ask specific questions from each of you. How is this specifically related to potentially social justice? And so when we start to ask ourselves that question of what is the injustice, I have gone back into your, you know what, I didn't even pull this up yet, so let me just do that really quick. I have in your Brightspace page, under the discussion link, where the prompt is to explain what we were supposed to do, like put up 2 topics you're thinking about and places that you could look at. What I did is I rewrote a series of questions. That same series of questions, I probably wrote on each and every single one of your papers. Some of you had already started to contextualize your topic, meaning you're putting it into the sphere of what specifically it is going to address, who's it going to be addressing, what the issue is and where it exists in society. But for some of us who didn't, not a worry at all. It wasn't required of you. I simply want to make sure that we're starting to think about some things. But there is a series of questions that can hopefully start to guide your understanding before we dive into our time at the library. So let me sign. You're signing into your Brightspace, and I'll show you all what you can see. Alright, y'all, so here it says topics I'm starting to think about, and then here was the assignment from before. But what I'm going to go ahead and encourage each of you to start asking yourself as you look at these topics and as you begin to build them out to explore and to invent, what I'm hoping that each of you are going to do is start to examine what are the issues or the problems that are coming from this topic. That's one of the things to start to think about. What are the issues or the problems? And now, although I'm using the words issues or problems, what if anything, did you start to understand about writing? Well, let me even ask you this. What do you find to be the problem if I would say, I want to explore, or it's like the problems with social media?
It's kind of vague.
Okay, good. It's vague, but what's the issue of me saying with the problems of social media? The problems of student debt. Okay, good. Yes, so we need to know which problem. But already, if I was writing, like today I'm going to inform you about the problems of social media.
Why is it important?
Okay, absolutely. And I think that, and that's a great point. So we may not always put our importance right there in our main idea statement or in our thesis, but the importance or the relevance of a topic will be something that you address in the background part of your speech, in the introduction where you put that. You're going to make that relevance or that importance correctly related to your audience. And of course, the relevance may also be implied, if we're thinking about it that way, when we start to describe that particular issue. But let's say I was giving, even just suggesting that my topic for just the first speech to address the problems with social media. Today I'm going to inform you on the problems of social media. Because why?
Because you're already addressing that as a problem.
Absolutely. And although those issues may in fact be problems, we're not going to simply utilize that language. We are simply giving you an example of the issues that are, going on. Here's what is presenting itself. Absolutely. So we'll remember that when it comes. Oh, and I'm so sorry. I'm supposed to be videoing this, and I'm sitting so close. Just my legs, I guess. Anywho, so when we say the problems, although yes, you are going to be examining these issues, because if they are an injustice, we are already assuming that they are a problem, right? But we need to go back also to the beginning and start to examine or start to understand how those even became a problem in the first place. So for each of you, when you start to look at the issues of the problems, there are going to be many issues or problems potentially with social media. There's going to be many problems with student debt, there's going to be many problems with emerging technologies, but what are they? And which one specifically is going to address an area of a culture or a specific marginalized culture that is being impacted and in turn not able to access the same resources as everybody else because of this barrier, because of this impact. Does that make sense to y'all? And so when we say then, think about who are responsible, who or what is responsible for the issue or the problems. When we're thinking about something like that, who or what, is it an individual entity? For example, is it because of like individuals, like each of you who are participating in the system? Or let's make sure what is responsible. It could potentially be the system itself. So what system, what law, what rule, what regulation potentially is there? Now, if we're not seeing a law, a rule, a regulation, there are also other components or contributing factors as to why the problem comes about. And that other problem may be something like, if it's not a law and it's not a rule, it's like, okay, well, how has...
An organization.
Okay, so an organization, absolutely. So you can look at a specific organization if you want to.
Conventions?
Which one?
Conventions.
Conventions. What do you mean?
Like social conventions?
Oh, which one?
Social
conventions.
Yeah, social conventions.
Okay. Oh, yes. Okay, good. Like
gender roles?
Yes, fantastic. And out of those gender roles, just a role, can oftentimes emerge a
Stereotype.
Yes, there we go. And that stereotype can then start to contribute, right? So remember that the stereotypes that have existed also for quite some time, how are those stereotypes manifested? How are they maintained? Who in fact does maintain those stereotypes? Yes, we know that all of us do, but is there a particular system that is continuing to perpetuate it by reproducing it? Does that make sense? So good. Awesome sauce. Okay, who are the issues impacting? And remember, this is where we want to start to look at our specific cultures, right? So who is it impacting? Remember, we have a lot of groups that can be impacted. Particular races, we know that like particular gender, sexual orientation, religion, ability. There are a lot of different people who it could be impacting, but we want to find a group that is being impacted and potentially targeted because of their particular circumstances. So it's why I say things like gun control isn't an effective topic to take on in here. It is an issue for sure, and we can look at all the many reasons for it to be an issue and like the system, etc. But who are the issues impacting? Everyone, right? Like gun violence doesn't have necessarily a specific target now in the United States. We see where guns are prevalent in all systems, and any single person, regardless of what they were born into, is the potential to be harmed by that. So the one place that may be able to like make where would you see gun control potentially being able to be argued in a social justice? Like which group may be pushed to the margins, if anything? Yeah.
I think there's some involvement with gang violence.
Okay. Because this is me thinking it through in my own head, but yeah.
Because it usually affects less affluent communities.
Okay. But if let's just say we wanted to restrict guns. Let's go with that. Who's it going to impact? I don't know even if this could be an argument, but we could make this.
Like the people who own guns already?
Right, so people already own guns, but again, it doesn't put like a face to that. There's an argument like from the NRA. It's like a big, like if we want to make a counter argument here. And I'm simply saying that mental health is a big issue in gun control. Now, mental health and the way that they have it laid out now, access to a gun, is it it's a right, I suppose. Is it not allowing me access to other things? Not really, I suppose. But I could see like maybe there's a mental health issue there. I haven't explored it enough, but the lack of access to or the inability to get something. But again, do you need said gun? I guess is the question. So, anywho, so there's what I want each of you to do is be able to go through and see how that is impacting. So when you're even thinking about issues of, yes, like such things like emerging technology, let's say emerging technology in the world around us, or things that are coming about and changing. Emerging technology, start to look, what is the technology going to do? How is it going to potentially impact jobs? How will it impact the individuals who are using that technology, etc.? Are these issues ones that are restricting a specific marginalized group? Access to resources of value? That's a good question to ask. What impact is the issue having on these persons? So what is the impact? Are they unable to potentially like make money? Are they unable to get specific resources because they not move out of their own area? Do they now have health problems as a result of it? Are they going through mental challenges, physical challenges, etc.? Is there any not making enough money to be able to support themselves? Is anything currently being worked on to help alleviate the issue? Now this may sound like we're jumping ahead, but y'all, something really important to consider is, are people already working on this issue? And the only reason that I want to make sure that you can check on that is because when we get to the next part of this class, persuasion, we want to make sure that there's enough evidence for you to be able to start to treat or suggest some kind of treatment for your audience. Many of you may pick a topic that has not yet been researched or that has not been developed a lot, but
It doesn't mean that if it doesn't have a treatment, or somebody doesn't have a plan, or an action group isn't already working on this, that you can't do it. It simply means that oftentimes in this case, we will have to utilize other resources for making sense of how it could potentially work and how it could potentially help. And that's where we employ the utilization of people like experts in the field, so potentially like economists who can foreshadow what's going to happen, potentially social scientists who have the experience and who can say, okay, well, we've seen it happen before, and our expertise is that if this goes through, this will happen. Does that make sense? The other option is to use analogical reasoning. And we'll talk a lot about these analogies as we continue to build in our class, but analogical reasoning, simply comparing two issues that are similar and suggesting that what's good in one case is also going to be good in another. So, for example, when trying to legalize marijuana in California, the language and, of course, the argument started to be, well, how do we know it will work in California? How do we know it will help? Good news, instead of having to say, well, look what we're doing over here in Europe, because that was a very hard comparison to make, seeing as how the norms, the rules, are driving, everything is so much different between the two. So when California, or when Oregon and Washington legalized in the election before, it allowed 4 years, or 2 years, 4 years, 4 years, to regather that information to figure out how it was impacting the society, so that they could use that as a comparison, that what's potentially good in Oregon and Washington will also be good in California. You too can do these different things. Many individuals have already worked on things like reforms of our systems in the particular states, or perchance they're working on alleviating social media's, negative impact on bodies, perchance, and they're already doing that in places like France and places, in other places. This is where you can start to do research and find that comparison, and then make suggestions for the United States. Does that make sense to y'all? So the reason I say look for a treatment or a plan is there's something that can help alleviate, that can help reduce, or that can in fact solve your issue. It's also wonderful to look to organizations who are already looking at your issue as well and already working at ways to target it. Why? Because an organization's website is going to be set up the exact same way as you will set up your, persuasive message. That's how, if you'll come to note, as we work on our patterns of organization, remember, individuals obtain and receive information in a specific way. So they have laid it out also problem, cause, solution. And what they've started to lay out for you are all the issues that are already going on with the topic. So it's not a terrible idea to also use them as resources beyond the library, and it can help you to simply start to see how that concept or that area of focus can be narrowed and identified. Does that make sense to each of you too? So those are some places to start to look at. But as you go through and you go back into the work over the course of the weekend, I encourage you to look at these questions and let them start guiding your thought process, at least even from what I've written here for each of you. In turn, we are also going to be moving and going on to something fun next week, and it is called the library. So the library orientation is going to be on the 11th. That's next Tuesday. You will not meet in this class. You'll meet at the library instead. They have yet to let me know if we are going to be in room 118 or 19, but they are both right next door to each other, so it will be on the wall of the door when we walk over. If they get me that information before Tuesday morning, I will for sure email it out to you with that reminder of where to go. But otherwise, we are going to be going to the library, and what I've written here for each of us to understand is the first phase of invention, so this invention process that we're going through, was you reviewing your semester-long topic module. That's simply the start of you starting to invent ideas that you want to speak about and coming up with a couple of topics to explore for your semester-long topic, which each of you have done for yourselves. Now we're going to take a deeper guided look into researching those topics, and that's going to be done via our library visiting experience and by looking at these topics through the pre-search assignment. So this research exploration exercise, I'll take you to the link in a second, but before visiting the library, it's a good idea to review this simply to get an understanding as to what you will be looking at,
to get an idea of how to narrow a focus, and simply to understand what kinds of questions you're going to be needing to explore in order to come up with a comprehensive research question. So please consider bringing a hard copy of this research exploration assignment. There's editable handouts in that link above to the library, and follow along and take notes. The research, or this pre-search assignment, this research exploration assignment, is going to be due on the 13th and the 14th. That's going to be during our one-on-one conferences. So if you go here and we click on, and you're more than welcome to, click on it from here or up here, but you just click here. It takes you right back to the Rhetorical Arts LibGuide. And this is going to be the research exploration exercise. What you need to complete it, then you have the worksheet itself, then you have an example, and then it gives you simply 2 examples. But going through some of these steps may also be of service to you before you visit the library. Here is the research exploration exercise. This is the one that you can print out or even bring a copy of, but remember it's also printed in your packet on half pages if you would like. But here is the area, and you'll simply enable the editing, and then you can edit directly into the document for when you turn it in. These questions that we'll go over, what it is I am going to ask you to narrow down your focus for this research exploration exercise to the one idea that you would like to focus on. And so although you can of course start working on it at any time, the research exploration exercise, you're only going to have to do 1 of your topics. I used to make you do 3, but that's a lot. Let's just do 1 for the purpose of. So over the course of the next couple days, start to ask yourself those other questions. Look through it. You can even look through the research exploration exercise, see if that will help to guide you to gather more information. But otherwise, by the time you come into the library on Tuesday, I hope that you'll have a good working, at least general topic as to where you want to go. And the research exploration exercise will hopefully help you to start reducing that topic to something specific, so that by the time you come to our conferences, you will have a working research question that will provide you with an effective answer to in fact create your, starts with a feet, ends with an S statement.
Thesis.
There she is, thesis statement. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Is that clear how this all connects and goes? Oh, amazing sauce, amazing sauce. Okay. That being said then, everybody, where are you going to turn in this research exploration exercise? During our what? Conferences. Y'all, if you come on down here, there is a conference sign up. And your conference sign up link is here. You'll just click on it, and then you can either go to the 13th or the 14th, whichever day works for you. Click on that date, and then you'll go ahead and click sign up. You'll put your name, put your email, put your phone number. You don't have to put anything in comments unless you want to, like a smiley face or hey. But I only say put your name and your email and your phone number because if something's going on that day, I'm very lucky to have the resource whereby this can email all of you at one time so that you can find out like what's happening that day, or oh, it's just these people who need to be emailed or whatever. So that would be a great help to me. Any questions on where to sign up? Like I said, if you have other things like responsibilities of school or of class or whatever, I encourage you to sign up sooner rather than later, only so that we can ensure that your time is fit in. So these are going to take place next Thursday after class, and then Friday almost all day. Happy Valentine's. I'll bring candy. Maybe a conversation heart. What's your favorite candy? Valentine's candy. Anybody have a good one? Chocolate? Anybody like sweet? Sour? Do y'all not eat candy? All right, good talk, everyone.
What's your favorite kind of candy?
Ah, my goodness. Okay, if I had to go chocolates, it's like a top 2 tie for Junior Mints and Raisinets.
Oh.
Interesting.
I'm not gonna eat them together, just, you know. Have you ever had a junior mint or raisinette?
Raisinets are terrible. I'd be surprised. I've never seen someone like
It's nature's candy. Okay, the last thing, the library module. Okay, and I thought, I tried to take this one out because I realized it definitely, this was the one, Tim, that you talked about? This one? Yeah. See how weird it looks? We'll just delete that altogether, y'all. Take that one right out of there. There we go. And you can always just do this one directly from the library. Also the one in your packet you can bring with you. Any other questions? I also put our new course schedule up here, so not up here, it's in the overview, just in case you ever need it. All right, smart ones. Fantastic. That being said, let us go ahead and we are going to have our friendly political groups. Do y'all remember those political groups? Yeah? Yeah. Remember those? Yeah. All right, so why don't we have y'all, those three groups.
we group up real quick?
What, huh? Yeah, why don't you group up? Why don't y'all group up for a whole, 2 minutes if you want. While they are all grouping up, why don't I have the rest of you do this? I want you to do one thing. I want you to look up Wikipedia or something, or look up Rush Limbaugh quotes. Or just look up Wikipedia and read about who Rush Limbaugh is. Don't worry about it. Were you into politics?
No, I was absent.
Don't worry. You'll enjoy whatever that's saying. So anybody who doesn't know, you go ahead and get that phone out and look that up while these groups continue to just do a little preparation. We'll give you 3 or 4 minutes. Then I'm going to write down some other things. We do.
His network is 5%. It's a conservative political commentary.
Okay, how are our groups who wanted to deliver today? Yeah, you ready? And then this group back here, good? Both? Fantastic. So why don't we have why don't y'all come down first, then we'll have our second group. And then,
Yes, all right, let us all put away our phones then. Get my hand. It is. Very fancy. Okay, everybody, let's give them a clap. So much
Hello, this is Timmy and Carson. My name's Camille, and we're talking about political power. And political power means like how influence gets distributed in culture, and it really depends on like who gets the chance to speak and what they're getting spoken about, or what they're speaking about. Sorry, and where they're speaking, and it also like depends on like that social hierarchy and that because like if you don't have that voice to speak, it's like a whole chain. And now.
So for some real world examples of political power, first from back in history in the 50s and 60s, the civil rights movement was very prominent, and Martin Luther King Jr. was able to be the face of this movement by employing very solid rhetoric through the use of literary stories such as Letters from Birmingham Jail and vocal performances such as I Have a Dream speech. So these are very prominent things where he used rhetoric as a positive to give his face more political power, I guess. So that was another example of how rhetoric is used. And then from today on the campaign trail, you see it in candidates that are trying to win votes in Iowa last week or beginning of this week, and then New Hampshire at the end or whatever. But these candidates are trying to use their words to sway their voters to their platform. But it isn't necessarily just about the issues, because people with solid issue platforms could be bad speakers and not win votes. But now rhetoric is playing a huge role in politics as we see it, because it's very public now. So then we'll pass it on to Tim. He'll kind of tie everything all together.
Yes, so these new current topics today with like the campaigning and even historically with MLK, it kind of all ties to this idea that we've been talking about, eloquentia perfecta, which also we know as a good person speaking well. And that's all about being able to deliver either in writing or oral form of effective getting your message across, as well as being virtuous or ethical. And this connects directly as when in these examples they're trying to be effective and getting their points and messages across, but at the same time they're trying to do something that's for the common good, which is this eloquentia perfecta. And this also relates to political power, and political power is probably the most direct correlation to these campaigns and MLK, especially as they're trying to get people to understand what they're saying and follow them, at the same time doing something good that everyone can support and follow through. So today, to wrap up, we talked about political power, and we talked also about real world examples, and hopefully now you understand it better with the whole tie-in with eloquentia perfecta.
Thank you all. Okay, let's have our other group come on down. Tell us a little bit about power. Here we go, here we go. Tell us a little bit. Power, and here you go. Okay, everybody. Not just me. There we go.
Hi, my name is Emily, and my group was assigned political power. So basically, political power is like what we are essentially like influenced by, and it has to do with a selection process that is reflective of a social hierarchy. So a person who is like chosen to have this platform is from the high rank of the social hierarchy, and this social group basically gets to have a bigger platform than social groups below them. So this basically creates almost a fabrication of ideology, a topic that is being discussed by just one particular social group because another doesn't have a say who's more familiar with the issue.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna pass it to Anakin to, is that right?
No.
Oh, what is it? Anakin
Yeah.
to explain a particular example that has to do with political power.
So political power and rhetoric can more accurately be abstracted away from just our typical view of politics to an issue of the opportunity to speak in front of the public. And the issue is not that some people have the opportunity to speak their minds to the public sphere, but rather that many groups do not have the opportunity to speak to the public sphere and therefore go unrepresented. So this unrepresentation of certain groups can easily develop, unfortunately, into a system of control that can be described as an echo chamber, in which the same ideas of the few in power, which oftentimes and do keep them in power, merely echo back with little to no counter arguments in the public sphere. This causes society to only bolster and make more concrete the ideas that keep the few in power. And so why this is important and how we all ought to move forward against this, Yanni's going to discuss the idea of eloquentia perfecta.
So now I'm going to explain how political power needs a theory of eloquentia perfecta. So we need a theory because people should acknowledge that we all have a platform to speak, but we all don't sometimes utilize it or utilize it incorrectly, such as political leaders like using their influence by speaking about different groups of people in a negative way. So we all need good leaders to speak well with eloquence and virtue and knowledge, and who are aware of their message can positively and negatively affect an audience. So in conclusion, we just talked about political power and how it plays a fight in the world and why we all need a theory of eloquentia perfecta.
So for both of y'all, yes, good. So for both of y'all, for the social hierarchy, talk to me even, and y'all can sit down, we can totally, if you want. Thank you so much. For the social hierarchy, talk to me about the idea of money. How does money fit in? Social hierarchy to begin with, sure, we can put like upper or middle class in that hierarchy if you want to. But if you're thinking about these debates even, yeah.
Like for example, with the campaigns, people with more money are going to be in the campaign longer, I guess, or in the fight for the Democratic nominee. So
And in
like,
that
if you're
fight,
paying more money, then you're going to get like more opportunities to speak in front of the public.
what types of opportunities? You get more TV,
You need money to have a campaign.
you need money to have campaign. At the beginning, the debates are whoever has the most what? But yeah, who's got donations, right? Like that, I mean, that's the way that you get to state your platform. Money, right? So like money is also going into this. And we've seen that these individuals, of course, of whom they're putting in there, they're not individuals who can't in fact speak, right? We're in a political sphere, individuals typically are well versed in speaking, but now how are we going to parlay you even more further? How are we going to push you further?
Also, it kind of goes, it can get simpler to like having the education to like have good rhetoric and like, to be able to speak in general.
Absolutely.
And some people don't even get the opportunity, and some people like don't get the rights to have that education. So it can go through that simple to or that far out.
Absolutely, that the political access to learning that rhetoric, right, that puts you into that particular, back into that hierarchy, absolutely. When an individual is able to speak effectively, they are typically regarded as somebody who can express the ideas, maybe of a group, maybe of whatever they're advocating for, and so yes, those individuals will oftentimes be listened to more. So they will have that political power. Something like Martin Luther King Jr., like he talked about, an individual who technically shouldn't have, by his demographic breakdown, had a good deal of power, yet was able to gain it because of an ability to, in fact, speak and learn how to speak and speak very effectively, and speak to bipartisan parties, to speak to different races, genders, groups, etc. So a very important thing to remember that with your education, of course, and yes, you are paying for a study of rhetoric, that can also afford you a privilege or an opportunity to express yourself in a way that may be a little better than somebody else, and who knows what that would allow for you to do in your own public sphere of becoming known. Good. And then the second ones, I love the idea about, so like, let's talk about the negative example, right? This exact idea that when individuals don't have that same social access, that their voices are, and oftentimes do go undisturbed. So that when an issue like, let's say, immigration gets brought up, right? And let's say undocumented immigrants are maybe on the forefront, we have to remember that the individuals of whom have the power are going to be able to speak those messages. How often do we hear dialogue from immigrants or undocumented immigrants, like in our mainstream media, in our mainstream like messages? Are these individuals put on television to speak, right? And then once individuals do have the option to speak, how much is their message heard due to their, political place in society? That credibility is always something as well. And so how then do the potential oppressive ideals continue to perpetuate because those voices are not there to have a counterbalance? So it is important to look at. So that was a really good one to especially bring up. So I bring up political power, and I asked each of you to look up a little somebody named Rush Limbaugh. And on Tuesday, and if you haven't heard about it in the news, Rush Limbaugh was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom at the State of the Union. That's when I had to turn it off. Mostly I just read these things anyways. I'm a reader of speeches because the State of the Union, it can be read in 20 minutes, whereby to watch it is going to take me 2.5 hours with all the clapping. So I like to read it instead. Why was I flabbergasted and disgusted? And the words that I used to my mother was, how dare he give this to Rush Limbaugh? And that is my own personal opinion. But it has grounded in the idea of eloquentia perfecta and what we were talking about with a good person speaking up. Okay, so the first thing, he doesn't believe in consent. Okay, so he doesn't believe in consent. So what does that mean? He does. So consent isn't a thing. So if consent isn't, if he's saying that, okay, so then that will negate what the rape issue, right? Either saying yes or no doesn't matter. Okay.
I don't know. I read like that he got fact checked, and like it was like 80 to 90% of what he said was like untrue, and he just said what he said to like fit his biases.
Yes, he definitely has a group that loves what he says, right? Yeah. So go. Okay, and in his fact checking, I mean, interesting. Yeah, like the idea of what facts versus just simple like stereotypes. I would absolutely, because he really worked on those too. Yeah.
But he just says a lot of stuff that's like not true, which I thought was like really interesting because he has like a really big audience, and he doesn't even bother to like come up with stuff that could support what he has to say. He just straight up just says whatever.
Okay. What else? Anybody else read something, Matt? You read it in your book. Remember reading it in your text? I mean, we just talked about it, right? Didn't somebody do that in their speech? Did you? Who did it? You did? You did, yeah. I was like, yeah, I remember you all talking feminazi. And when that night I was like, oh my gosh, the man who coined the term feminazi, yay! And definitely called Monica Lewinsky a slut more than anybody I didn't know Monica Lewinsky was anything but a slut because of Rush Limbaugh. I mean, that was the primary language. When we talk about First Amendment Week, though, friends, have we heard what's going to be happening?
Monica Lewinsky is going to be speaking here, right?
Yes!
Yeah.
And if you didn't know, and that was just you and me playing on that, I loved it, that you were reading in my mind. Maybe. Fantastic. Absolutely. Did y'all know about this? Okay, so some of you did hear, some of you didn't. Anyways, First Amendment Week, we can definitely go back. Monica Lewinsky is going to be speaking. I love the idea. I love the topic. If you have yet to watch the documentary, The Clinton Affair, it is fantastic. It's on HBO. It is a 6-part series, and it is a both sides, but it has a lot of Monica Lewinsky on there. And it's the big idea of why Monica Lewinsky is coming during this time is because she has been, since the issue, she's gone, back to school. She has a PhD in social psychology, and she's written a book, and she does expert speaking in regard to public shame and humiliation. And so with the realm of our social world that we live in, and the ability for everybody to jump on board and, give an opinion about somebody else's behavior, looks, etc. It's an interesting time to look at, but yeah, somebody who was definitely created. So slut shaming, really, we have, that's a great gift from him. So. Yeah, so if the racist and classist and, horrible things they said about individuals' ability, the fact that he coined the term feminazi and slut-shamed Monica Lewinsky all the way into the homes of millions, it was disgusting to see the president award him an honor, because what does that now set a precedent for? What? We are now going to reward this behavior, that this behavior is going to be rewarded, that it's something that we should look up to, that individuals will go back and, just like Rosa Parks, who got it, and look at what she did. Oh wow, the Medal of Freedom. What are these high caliber individuals doing? So when we talk about a good person speaking well, this is a big issue when it comes to a good person speaking well. Somebody who has the political power to be able to award an individual who decides to not choose good of the individual and the society. And now that individual is deemed as somebody that we should revere and respect, which is an unfortunate thing, because a lot of our, this divide, well, that's a whole other Oprah. We'll keep it on topic. Think about what kind of access we give individuals when we say, it's okay to talk like that, it's okay to do this. Here's the power, and here's the power to do so. Good job, everybody. So we know that power is withheld in our rhetoric. We know that we have our own personal power, that we can obtain our needs, our goals, hopefully maintain our relationships, develop them in a helpful manner way. We have psychological ability through our rhetoric, the ability to help individuals to feel, to potentially see things in a different way, to create connections to ideas, topics, behaviors that can assist and help, right? Solely by the use of maybe language or the symbolic systems that we have, right? Pictures, images, sound, etc. And then we also have political power. So remembering those structures and those hierarchies that exist, and how our access to be able to use a voice in a public sphere, not necessarily political, but in a public sphere, depends highly on our ability to speak well. And so, in turn, because we have these great powers, I remind you that we have a great responsibility to that good to speak. Yeah? Okay, team. Now, any other thoughts or questions about justice or ethics, or where the realm of social justice is and how that builds? Just our basics. Everybody pretty clear on that? We'll continue to talk about how they exist within your own topics over time. Okay. All right then, let's cruise. Shall we cruise on in? All right, let's cruise on in. What do I mean cruise on into? Well, friends, let's cruise on over to our packet. So if y'all can, go ahead, and what I'm going to have you do is open up to the first part, the informative speech description and checklist. So the informative speech, informative speech, one of the most typical types of speeches that is given. The informative speech, if you like to think about it, is really like a journalist. I think I've told you before. Think about you're looking for simply the facts. Your job is going to reproduce the ideas, the information, the research, the statistics that are out there about your topic, and represent those to your audience to show them what is the state, not of the union, but the state of your topic. What's going on? Where is it at? How does it exist? So in this speech, you are going to be giving the audience either knowledge that they already have, and so you're going to explain it maybe in a different way, or perchance build upon the knowledge that they don't have or that they need to know more about. Because your topics are dynamic and they have within them areas of history, issues of sociology, anthropology, who knows what they have within them, there is going to need to be a lot of good contextualization. It's going to need to be explained to your audience, one of whom may not know about it. So keep that in mind. The speech should teach your classmates something mature, worthwhile of their time. So obviously you all will be picking a mature topic. Each of you have that in and have already proved that now. But the area of worthy of their time is something that we do with our audience analysis, where we start to identify who are we speaking to and how can I make sure that this speech, with every choice that I make, it has an intention, and that intention is to go back to the purpose of the speech. Remember, 5 to 7 minutes, we want to make sure that our time is utilized effectively so that they are getting exactly what they need to in order to understand your message. You're going to be following a basic pattern of organization for your informative speech. Informative speeches typically fall within 3 different patterns of informational organization, but we'll be looking at 4 different ways in the event that you would like to take on a cause and effect. So these patterns of organization, and when I say this for the rest of the semester, patterns of organization mean how you organize your main points. Because how am I going to organize the body of my speech? What are my topics that I'm going to focus on? How am I going to describe what this speech is about? Remember the how and the what, the thesis. So the organizational pattern are your main points. So those different types are chronological, they're spatial, they're topical, and cause and effect, as it says on here. We know chronological because we went through that when we started our introduction speeches, right? We did a past, a present, a future, or a before, during, after, however that pattern worked. But there's going to be other options for us. Now, we more than likely will not be doing a spatial organization because we're not necessarily talking about a location or an object, but I will describe that for you in the event that in the future you need to go and write or you need to do something, you have that. But a particular emphasis is going to be placed on choosing a variety of supporting materials. And we're going to talk about the different types of supporting materials that you can use in this class. We already just talked a little bit about an analogy, but we'll talk a lot about your statistics, about testimonies, about examples, when to use them, when not to use them, how to use them effectively. But the most important thing there is that, again, they're appealing to your particular audience. What is going to help them to understand based upon what you know about them and maybe what you know about the disposition of them toward or about your topic. And then you're also going to need to conduct research, and that's why we're going to be going to the library. So you're going to need to find outside sources. You will be the primary source of this speech. You can give your own voice, your own opinion, your own experience with things. That is still your own voice. That isn't an outside source, though. So that's still your own voice, but we are going to be needing to use outside research. So how have you come to these conclusions? How have you come to the information? Who in the world has been doing this research? Other people's. So we're going to be looking for experts, and we're going to be looking for credible and reliable expertise and research in order to implement that and put that into your speech so that it starts to develop that kind of, 1, credibility, and 2, it's going to also give an expertise to your to the work that you're doing. And so through this expertise and through these experts that you will be presenting, although we aren't persuasively writing, tell me about how that maybe influences your rhetorical process. So how would the art of persuasion, so if we were looking at something like that, why is an informative speech still loaded with rhetoric?
Because you need to deliver in a way that's going to interest you.
Okay, good, and that is a rhetorical quality, absolutely. Getting our audience interested, getting them engaged, having them come to see what we're speaking about, absolutely a rhetorical process, good.
You have to explain why it's important.
Absolutely, we're going to talk about the importance of the speech, and we're going to make that clear to our audience, and good.
You have to make it credible with like information that you find.
Absolutely. Are they going to buy that that statement is true, right? So even if we are presenting them with, yes, factual information, we need to make sure that that factual information is true as well. And the way that we've designed this speech is for them to come to a conclusion, the same one that you intended to set out. Hope that conclusion is whatever you decide to inform them about, that they will come to see that. And each step that you are making is guiding them toward that in some kind of fashion that, yes, we can not necessarily think that we're trying to urge you to take action on something or go out and change your mind or your belief in something, but we are encouraging our audience through our organization, through our language, through what the material that we're presenting, to at least buy in to this information, to believe that this information that we're presenting is true, to see how it creates itself. So, you'll need to be conducting research on the scholarship. Find out what is new, what is fresh, what is exciting on your topic. And that's what's a fun part to keep this engaging, not only for you, but for the audience as well. When we talk about the topics that have been done quite a lot, this is very important. So again, going back to it just for the trade purpose, but going back to an abortion topic, we have heard these arguments numerous times in our lives. I'm going to assume that you've heard them over and over again. What's going to be that message that's going to change it differently this time? Because we've heard the same arguments and we've heard the same reasoning, but what's new, what's fresh, what's exciting that we don't know about? And that's where your audience can start to pick it up, get interested, see what different types of maybe new research or new foundations or new issues are getting brought through. You are required to use 3 outside sources inside your speech. So that means that you will be putting those sources not only in your outline, so you'll be learning how to write them and incorporate them into your speech in a way that is different from that of the written form, because we will be not incorporating it in to sound seamless, but instead we will be using it to give credit to those people. So how do we do that with still picking it in? Then you're going to need to be showing me or demonstrating to me in a works cited page that you have utilized those sources. And then the final thing is you will speak those sources out loud. So in those 3 ways we will hear your sources. But the 3 are what you have to put in, 3 different sources. But you're more than welcome to use more than that, of course. What is a reliable work? Well, anything, books, magazines, journals, newspapers. You can use a documentary, a TV show, a podcast, right? You can use, so many things. And yes, you can use websites. Websites specifically for the informative speech aren't so questionable. We'll start to talk about why using websites can be questionable, of course, with the library, and I'm sure you're aware of this. But we can certainly use websites, especially if it's like from an organization that you're talking about and using their terms, their information, their language, do so. Because this speech does not seek to persuade you on anything or buy into something being good or bad or right or wrong, the bias by utilizing a source of whom you're talking about is taken away in that context. But we'll learn how to write like that. And then the last thing here is about just following our basic principles of good delivery. These are things like eye contact, making sure that we are using our voice in an effective way, working on your hand movement and your posture. Here it says, please practice 5 times out loud to increase your confidence, your extemporaneous delivery, and to reduce any type of your vocalized pauses that you've been working on. So one of the things that, and I know, is this trying to erase? Yes, it is. One of the guided, all right. One thing that goes back to your syllabus, and don't worry, you do not need to necessarily write it out now, but one thing that will go back to your syllabus about the communication apprehension. One of the things on there was 3 little lines, and the 3 little lines are practice, practice, practice. Practice helps to not make what perfect, no, because we can only make pretty darn good, right? But practice does, in fact, help us to reduce our communication apprehension. How many of us maybe didn't practice out loud until the day of our speech, and then maybe when we went out and practiced with our friend, it was like, oh, got it out of my body, I feel even a little bit better now. So what I always encourage individuals to do is to practice first as you write. As you start to write your work, this will help with your delivery, is practice as you write it. You do not speak the same way that you write. And when people write and then try to speak in that same style, there is a disconnect. And it becomes problematic for the speaker because they are speaking in a way that isn't very familiar to their natural speaking style. And when we have to adjust our natural speaking style, that's when we start to forget, or we wouldn't speak like that normally, so it's like the sentence structure, I have to memorize it or think about it in a different way. Write it the way that you would say it. So say it out loud and then write it in that way. If you had a friend in front of you, even practice it. It's like, when deciding to make a chocolate cake, one may need to, procure different ingredients from the top designers. It's like, when we're gathering ingredients, you're going to need these particular things, right? How would you say it in person rather than writing it? I encourage you to start that practice and then go forward. Because as you do so, that's going to get it in your body, it'll become more comfortable to you, and it'll be in a way that's going to be easy to talk about. And you'll know that when you need to say it, it can be said in the manner of which you would speak. And even if it isn't said correctly, you'll be able to say it in a different way, in which, you speak. The second thing is practice in front of another person. It is always trying to practice in front of another person, and I tell you to do this because, and don't practice in front of another person who's like super nice, like your nice friend. Who do you want to practice in front of? Your friend who will give you some positive feedback. They'll give you some criticism. Many of you ask the question, I'm scared my audience won't understand what I'm saying. I think that my audience won't think it's funny, that they'll laugh at me, that they'll do all those things, that they won't get it, that they won't understand, my language. All of those questions that you have can very easily be vetted in front of another person. Did that example make sense? Do you have a better example? They could just be like, oh yeah, no, that part did not make sense at all. This part was not interesting. I started to want to fall asleep during this part, Amanda. What can we do to make it a little bit more engaging, right? Maybe we could give something else. This is a great way, and I'm always more than happy, of course, to be this person for you as well. But it is, a great thing to practice with an active audience of whom is your actual audience. So thinking about those people who are, your friends or that you feel comfortable speaking to. They are also individuals who can assist in stopping you when you are doing any type of vocalized pause or any type of physical expression that you would like to reduce over the course of the semester. Like I said before, if there is a word, have that individual stop you every time you say that word and start over. If you start over at the beginning, by the third time, you are not going to want to start over anymore. And your brain starts to think before it speaks in order to prevent you from not doing something that you don't want to do. So try to practice with somebody else, even if it is incredibly frustrating, and even if you have to speak as slow as you want to. I'm also more than happy to help you with that. I know that some of you did your extra credit assignment, and I saw a lot of you write some ideas within there based upon the feedback that was given. If any of you do need some help on specific areas of delivery that are still tripping you up or that you're still thinking about, you simply let me know and I can always help and guide you on that. The last thing is that you're going to practice 5 times out loud. And that can be with yourself, that can be in a speaking environment. I like to practice in the car because I can't look at anything else and I simply have to keep going if I'm doing it. That's the most important thing, that when you practice out loud by yourself, if you're doing so, make sure that you can do so in a space that is very familiar to the same area you are going to be in, so that you know how to use your space you are going to be required to use a visual aid in this speech, and that means that you are going to need to be deciding where you want to be for that particular visual aid. Do I need to be over here? Do I need to be explaining it? Then will I walk back out to my audience and use it, the space, or will I utilize the speaker's triangle and then finally come back for my visual aid? How we use our space and getting an awareness of that can put us at ease as well, because once you get in almost like a rehearsal, a dress rehearsal, if you will. Do it like a dress rehearsal. Practice using the podium, practice walking over, practice how long it's going to take to turn it on, practice with your visual aids. It can help so very much. And saying it out loud is so much better than saying it inside. I think I've told you, I am the most amazing speaker in my head. So good. And then once I start to speak out loud, sometimes it does not sound that exact same way. And when I say sometimes, most of the time, it doesn't sound that same way. So practice it out loud and get it in your body. That being said, the informative speech, if you've started to listen, every little part about all of our speeches, of course, are designed to help you communicate your passion, your interest, your desire, what you want to advocate on, your message. But the most important people that we think about to receive that message is not you, because you already believe it, you've already bought into it, you already know your information. Who do we need to concentrate on? Oh my gosh, y'all, the audience, absolutely, totally. So at the beginning of the semester, as a friendly reminder, each of you were asked to take your audience analysis quiz. The audience analysis survey has been done. You can look at it here if you would like. It'll take you directly to the results of this class. And it will start to show you the breakdown of who we have in fact, our class. I think the important one that you may want to be interested in here, and this is going to be the most helpful for things like persuasion as well, is 1 to 5 about American values. So when we talk about these particular American values, what do people value? When we know what individuals value, our values are those things that will influence not only our attitudes toward particular topics, but it will also influence our behavior and what we do and what we choose to do. So if you start to think about what people are interested in, we'll talk about this, of course, starting to play on some of these ideas, find stories that highlight specific traits like this, potentially find examples that illustrate how this in fact is something like pursuing happiness, or how it builds trust, or the independence is there and that's what's important, right? So simply understanding what your audience is really interested in and what they like to focus on can give us some ideas also when we start to choose our particular work. Here in regard to the learning style, of course this one is a lot for me as well, but if you see how people are starting to learn best, these are the different ways. So usually a verbal with a written and a visual. So the thing is that notes are not necessarily something, or written is not necessarily something you're getting in a speech. So really relying on potentially the visual as well as how are we going to make that come alive for the people who don't have the work in front of them to help them to understand. So you can go back and look at this at any time. It'll be available to you, and we'll look at this a bit more when we get into our lectures on supporting materials. Other than that, after reading through, and was everybody able to maybe get a good idea about some of these very fun, informative speaking articles? Yes. So in regard to the audience in this case, can anybody tell me like 2 things that we need to keep in mind when we're starting to write our topic to our audience? What were some of those key ideas or a takeaway? Anything at all?
Don't overwhelm your audience with information.
What is a great way to not overwhelm your audience with information?
Only talk about the important things.
And how could we decide what's important?
Main points.
Absolutely. So we can start to research, right? We can start to identify, and then how can we help to not overwhelm them with too much information? Absolutely. Concentrate on what is important and start to identify that and organize it in an effective way. Even if it is a ton of information, if we put it into at least kind packages to help them get that, it can help too. You know how this is in those classes where you have like 3 hours. Any of you are taking a like 3-hour night class or anything like that? Absolutely. So it's 3 hours. You have to get all that information in at one time. It's like, oh my goodness, this is a lot to take in. Especially nowadays, how much information is out there on everything. So much, it's overwhelming, right? So with those 3 hours, it has to be organized in a way that's going to help you to get all that information, to obtain it, to understand it, to take it all in. So that's a really great one. And what else, y'all? Anything else? Yeah. It says right there on that first page also, you could do something like use what? An audience. Why in the world would I do that? Oh, because we can see what interests them, what they're excited about, what age group they are in, how this is going to potentially impact them in some specific way, right? Starting to ask topics. So if you were ever in, of course, an environment, you're asked to go speak on something, you can always like start to get an understanding of like what this audience is, what are they interested in, what is their relevance to this particular topic. That's always a great way too, is that if you start to think about your specific topics, how is it going to impact them? In what ways? And so we will talk about making it relevant to your audience, of course, when we state the importance of it, but making that connection to them, or perchance using individuals in their age group, or showing how when you graduate, potentially this could happen as well, is always a good way to do it. Also utilizing their language and everything. Any other ideas that you want to throw out there? Something interesting that you learned about the audience, or utilizing the audience, or making sure that the audience is engaged? Okay, hopefully you are seeing that each and every single one of these things about the audience is important to take into consideration when we are starting to look at our topic, and when we're starting to focus on our topic and what we want to speak about, and when we're finding out how to organize those particular main points. That topic, the organization of it, coming up with a clear central idea and organizing the main points effectively to make a good thesis statement is going to do all the things like sustain the involvement of your audience. It's going to attempt to not overwhelm them with different ways. It's going to give this, it's going to allow for them to increase their understanding because of how it is structured and organized. So there's a lot of different reasons as to why we look at our audience, even in this first invention part, and starting to explore what we will look at. So when we look about starting to think about your topic, and hopefully each of you were able to go through and look at that. But what I want, is that where we are? Turning to page 15. To concentrating a bit more. As for each of you to know, on Tuesday in the library, I'm going to be going over how to write a research question. That's one of the things that is going to be due when we meet in our conferences. And I'll also be finishing up on whatever we need to in regard to said thesis statement. But the first thing that I want to talk about is that each of us are, of course, going to be having some kind of topic. And so we know that this topic is going to go for the entire course of the semester. But when you begin to generate a speech, and when you start to decide what is the speech and what am I giving, the first thing that you're going to want to identify is what is my purpose. And we've talked about this before, that the things you always need to consider are your purpose and your topic and your audience. And these things are going to work in together. This topic will make sense, like how we decide to determine what our message is. But the purpose, the situation, the context, the reason for speaking is something that we need to take into consideration. This idea of, so can anybody describe to me what this idea is, what it means, what its purpose is? Y'all read a little Aristotle during your first year seminar? Anybody grow up in a Catholic home or go to a Catholic school? Did anybody ever go to Kairos? What do they call it when you, like, I know, what happens in Kairos stays in Kairos, but what was the purpose?
God's time.
God's time. Is that what they said?
There's a time and place, and this is like the time and place is now, that's.
Yeah, oftentimes they will do that like in like your senior year, like this is a moment, like this is the time and place for like these messages to come to resonate on your soul, etc. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So there's a time and place, and there's a time and place for everything, and there's a time and place in specific, which Aristotle was suggesting. There's a time and space or place when a message is going to be heard most effectively. If we think about it, when people are in a space where they believe they are getting one thing, but they get something else, that's a problem. Have you ever been invited over, and I don't know if you all have anybody like ever been invited into like a multi-level marketing? I feel like y'all are probably young for something like that.
Yes.
Oh, pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
Well, if I said pyramid scheme, then I would be now persuasively, rhetorically guiding you to a specific visual, right? It's like, oh, conspiracy theories. You're like, really? Or just a different way of thinking? Okay, tell me about it.
I was eating pho,
Oh?
and then the guy was like, he was like he owned the restaurant, and then he was talking about how he used to own a pharmacy, but then the pharmacy didn't and then he made a lot of money, but then there was like more like CVS's and like Walgreens, so then he just closed down his pharmacy and then he opened up restaurants instead, and then like he told me about how he closed down one of them, and then he still had 2 left. And all of a sudden he was like, so you're in college, right? And I was like, yeah, like it was like me and my family.
And was it, would you like to make more money?
No, he started talking about like something that really helped him. Like he was going through some health crisis, and then he was selling hemp oil. And then he started talking about, like, he like pulled out, he's like, wait. Just like, do we leave? Like, what do we do now? And then he pulled out his computer and he gave us a slideshow presentation about it.
And how receptive were you?
We're just like,
What was your purpose of being there?
we wanted to eat pho.
With who?
My family.
And talk about what?
Family stuff.
There you go. So, how was the message?
Not the right time.
Were you irritated?
We wanted to leave. We were like,
Gotta get out of here,
Yeah, we
right?
were
I don't want to hear this
scared.
message. You're definitely not buying into what? Hemp oil now.
no.
It's a time and place. You want to give me one minute?
Yeah, just basically a bunch of my friends work for a company called Cutco, which is really
Cool.
Let's be honest, those knives are great though.
Yeah.
Bottom line, those knives are great.
So, like, when they hire you, they take your entire contact list and send them a message.
And,
But I mean, my friends make money, so.
yeah. Again, those knives can sell themselves, but those people who get those messages, do they want them?
I didn't. It blew up my phone.
So here's what I want you all to at least consider as I guess we go back in here. Each of you are going to be giving this speech, and this first speech, it has one specific purpose altogether, or general purpose, sorry. Every single speech that you will ever give in your entire collegiate career will fall, and the rest of your life will fall into one of 3 categories. Every speech that you hear, you can also identify as to falling into one of 3 categories. That way, you not only know what the purpose is and the intention of that speaker, that if they're here to inform and they're trying to get you to buy something, now that's a disconnect in some way. But the 3 different types of speeches are, yes, to persuade, also to entertain. So think about like comedy speeches, a toast, after dinner speech, something like that. And then also, and then informative speeches. Each of you are going to be doing a specific type of speech. Which is it? To inform. That's it, everybody. And so the general purpose and the most broad purpose for all of us is this one, to inform. And that's all that you simply will have. Over the course of the next couple days, make sure that you're reading through the research exploration exercise. Make sure that you are coming to the library on Tuesday, not to our class. Please sign up for conferences for next Thursday. I'll remind you as well. I'll send you all an email about the library reminder with a date, in fact.
go back to those topics, start to ask yourself some of those questions, and remember, what do I want to inform my audience about? What specifically? How can we start to narrow and develop that topic? All right, y'all. Have a wonderful rest of your afternoon and have a kickin' weekend. I will see you soon.
Thank you.
I don't have time. I make it to my class.
Thank you.